The one button rotation has been a huge deal for the entirety of the WoW community since its release a few weeks ago. Everybody wants to know if it's actually gonna destroy the game or if it's actually something good for it. Even Bellier made an entire video checking the data and concluded that the one button rotation was insanely beneficial. But is this actually true? I decided to create a new character on a build I've never played before, only use the one button rotation and see whether I would do good DPS and also if I actually would learn. And what I experienced completely changed what I believed. So let's see what actually happened. Subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Go to my Ko-Fi if you want to support my content. Go to my Twitch to watch me live every morning. And let's get into it. My main opinion on the matter was that the one button rotation would be a little bit too good. I actually made an entire video talking about it. It reminded me a lot of what happens in Guild Wars 2 with low intensity builds. Builds that you can press one button on it and do more damage than 90% of the player base. Would the same thing happen in World of Warcraft? Well, we created an Outlaw Rogue, the worst spec to actually use the one button rotation with. You end up losing 35% of your total damage while using this. And this is on single target. Who knows what would actually happen in AoE. Assassination and Havoc actually were worse here, but I didn't have the H. And considering the amount of movement that you would have to play with it, it sounded horrible. So Outlaw was the best second option. Assassination would have been fine too. I don't know why I didn't go for that. Now, why does Outlaw get so affected by the one button rotation? This for a lot of reasons, and a lot of them I had to learn through actually playing with the spec. But the main reason is Adrenaline Rush. This is a 3-minute cooldown that essentially makes most of your damage, but every time you use a spender, you spend your energy, the cooldown of your Adrenaline Rush will go down. And because of the fact that every time you use your one button rotation, it has a bigger global cooldown that you usually have in a normal rotation, this means that your Adrenaline Rush will not be up as much as it should, as the cooldown will be longer than it usually should. There's also a problem with Killing Spree that just randomly triggers in the middle of your rotation, making you just move around the enemies randomly and, well, killing you and your allies if you have a mechanic. The one button rotation just is not good with Rogue, particularly Outlaw. It just doesn't work. But could we actually perform better than most people in Mythic Plus? Well, it was time to gear up, do some time walking, some LFR, in order to get that gear to get into those dungeons. And that's exactly what we did. We ended up around 649 of item level, which isn't the best, but for the type of keys we were doing, +5s, +6s, +7s, this was okay. And we could compare ourselves with people who are not super good, but also not super bad. Regular players, with more or less the same amount of gear we had. Now, these are very, very low keys, and honestly, it was very hard for me to actually do more damage. I was doing my best to actually learn the spec and use my cooldowns in the correct manner, as it is a very, very important part of Outlaw Rogue, using our Adrenaline Rush in the correct moments, and using Vanish to make your Adrenaline Rush last for longer. And I was honestly learning the spec pretty well. But unless the player I was against was very similar to my item level, it was very hard to even compete with them. And sometimes even then, I would not do more damage than them. In certain scenarios I would, if they would make a mistake, I would, but it was very, very close all the time. And whenever I had a player that actually knew what they were doing, they would absolutely destroy me in the meter, as you can see this Hunter doing. It seemed that the one button rotation was doing its job. It was, yeah, letting me pay attention to the mechanics of the boss and learn my spec, but it was not doing more damage than people that were actually trying their best, which is what you want this button to be. Not to be a replacement, but an option. And I did learn a lot. I learned to press evasion as a defensive cooldown when I was gonna be targeted by some enemy. I learned how to use feint to take less damage from area of effect attacks. I learned how to use blind to see everyone around me, where every mob was actually trying to kill us. I learned how to kick and interrupt my enemies, as it was the main thing I was paying attention to, as the one button rotation would do the rest. And I also learned to use adrenaline, and as soon as my enemy would die, go into stealth instantly, so I can keep the adrenaline rush in my bar until the next encounter. I was unironically learning the spec as I was playing. The one button rotation was teaching me, maybe not the actual rotation, but teaching me everything else. I could concentrate on learning the mechanics of the fight, learning all of the specs intricacies that were very important for me to engage with the game, and I was also learning how to use my cooldowns. Everything but the base rotation I was actually learning. The one button rotation was working, and it was very surprising to me because I didn't expect this. Yeah, sure, the damage wasn't very good, but I mean, that's how it should be. It shouldn't be a replacement. That being said, we were using the war spec, so I thought, is there anything I could actually do to make this one button rotation a bit better on Outlaw? The percentage in this table is compared to the best type of build you can bring from each of the specs. But certain abilities sometimes are worse on the one button rotation than they actually are on a normal rotation. For example, whenever you're actually on stealth with adrenaline rush on Outlaw, you're supposed to use your between the eyes in order to get a lot of damage out of your crack shot. But whenever you're using it with the auto one button rotation, it instantly goes into killing spree, even though you should probably do that after you drop your stealth, making you lose a lot of damage and also making you lose a lot of adrenaline rush potential. So I decided, what if we make killing spree disappear? But then I realized that if you do that, Trickster doesn't work anymore. And let me just say that I realized this way too late. It may or not have happened after a whole dungeon. So we would have to go to Fatebound instead. And guess what? The Fatebound build doesn't use killing spree, so is two birds with one stone. Now we needed to learn how to use keep it rolling, but I actually didn't because I just installed a weak aura that tells me when I should use it. Now we could go into dungeons not worrying about killing spree, using between the eyes and the crack shot talent that makes me use between the eyes without any cooldown on stealth and get most of the value from these talents, and of course do more damage, while also not killing myself or my teammates with killing spree. And boy oh boy did it work. Rolling, boys. A bit more damage, come on. No! He's gonna make it! RNG, save! Yes! Yes! We did it! Top DPS on Auto Rogue, the worst spec to use one button rotation. Oh my god! We had actually done it. We did a good amount of damage through with these changes. Now, of course, it didn't mean that I was doing top DPS the entire dungeon. I actually lost many times to the Shaman. But to be fair, he did have better gear than I had, and I was most of the time doing more damage than the DK. It was actually pretty cool. It reminded me a lot of Guild Wars 2 Alive builds, where you'd set up the entire build, the gear and the talents, to make it so you press one button and you do the most amount of damage. For example, Hammer Guardian does around 30k DPS, but on a normal Guardian build you can get to 44k DPS. But you sacrifice this potential and, of course, change the build and the traits in order to make it so you just press one button instead of having to learn the entire rotation. The same thing applies here. I replace killing spree with something else, I adapt the build and the talents to make it so the one button rotation works better, and I could potentially even choose certain buttons to press here from the single button assistant whenever I want, so it doesn't make a mistake. In theory, I could actually cook a rotation with the single button assistant that does way more damage by avoiding the problems that the button will do. We haven't gotten there, and I would have to think more about it, but it should work for many specs that do not do very well with this rotation. But honestly, it really seemed like the one button rotation was working well. There were moments where I wouldn't do top DPS, there were moments where I was doing good DPS. It all depended on, of course, how the other players would play. If they would play badly, they would get punished, and then I would be doing more DPS. And if they weren't, and if they were playing very, very good, well, they would completely destroy me in the meter, which is exactly how it should work. I think a 40% damage reduction, or around that, between 30 and 40, seems to be the perfect spot to have every spec, so you cannot get a super big advantage on Mythic Plus and not make it so people feel like there's no point in trying. And if you can't do more damage than a person that is losing 40% of the damage with a single button rotation, well, maybe you have to get better. Honestly, this experience completely changed my mind on a single one button rotation. I learned my spec, I had fun, and I really truly did have a lot of fun, and it made me enjoy a lot of parts of World of Warcraft that I don't usually enjoy, like interrupting OCC, because I'm so into the rotation that I don't pay attention to them. And I really, really like that. I think I'm gonna continuously use it. I'm gonna try Subtlety, and I'm gonna try Assassination, see if we can do something in there to make the builds work a bit better. Better than Outlaw, that is. And then maybe we can make some builds for that and try another spec. Because yeah, 40%, 35% damage reduction seems to be a good number, but there's a lot of specs that are actually at 20%. And that might actually be too good. But we haven't tested it, so I guess that's gonna be our next thing. And who knows, maybe I end up making one video for each class and seeing which one is the best to use for your one button rotation, and maybe making some builds for them. Let me know if you're interested in that, and let me know if there's anything I missed on Rogue or some type of change that you could make in the talents or the rotation to make it so you do more damage with the one button rotation. I'm not an expert. I just started playing the spec. I have no idea, and I will definitely think about it, but I don't know. Let me know. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Go to my Ko-Fi if you want to support my content, and go to my Twitch to watch me live doing this, because I don't play off stream really. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Subscribe. See you guys around. Love you all. Ciao, ciao.